Well, there once was a king, and the king had a very, very fond desire to have a son. But he didn't have one for quite some time. But as fables would have it, one day he found that he was to have a son. And he was so happy because he wanted a son to mentor, a son who would be able to actually learn from him. He wanted to mentor him and to be able to take his place as king one day. And so when the son was born, he was so delighted. And then something happened, and he noticed that his son wasn't quite growing as he should, and that he seemed to be deformed. And as the child grew, the king's heart broke because he loved his son so dearly, but he knew that he was going to have a tough life because people would not accept him as the beautiful soul that he was. And the king said to him on his 11th birthday, "In 1 year you will be 12. That is a very important year. So tell me now what you would like to have during this year for your 12th birthday." And the young prince said, "What I would like to have is a statue of myself, standing straight and tall in the middle of the garden." And this broke the king's heart because he thought, how is that going to be for my son to see a statue of himself that is straight and tall when he himself will be able to barely look up to see it? But the king did as his son asked, and he built this beautiful statue of a young man, of his son, straight and tall, standing victorious in the middle of the garden. And oh my, how his heart broke thinking of his son, and what a terrible thing it would be for him to see this every day, and it was not like he was. But the young prince had something else in mind, and every day he would go out in front of the statue and he would look up at the statue as best he could, and he would look up and he would stretch his neck and pull his spine, and he would try every way he could to begin to straighten his body. And as time went on, the muscles stretched, the sinews became more flexible, and as he struggled and strained, every day in just an almost imperceptible way, he could look more clearly into the face of the statue. So on his 12th birthday, he invited his father and all of his friends and all of his relations to come to the garden, to the center of the garden, to the statue. And as he stood in front of the statue, he moved his body, he straightened his spine, he moved his neck, until he was standing looking that statue straight in the eye. And he threw up his hands in a signal of victory of what he had been able to accomplish. And what a wonderful story that is, isn't it? Isn't that just a wonderful story of overcoming, a story of being able to change something in your life that you wanted changed? Well, this is the 6th week of our fall program. And of course, we are studying how to pray without talking to God. And this week, our chapter was on wholeness. And through wholeness, we know that we are already whole. Within that young prince was a straight, tall young boy. And we know that within us, we have a divine nature. Our divine nature, which calls us forth to begin to demonstrate that in our daily life. In 2 Corinthians 3:18, Paul says, "And we who with unveiled faces all reflect the Lord's glory are being transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit." I believe that this passage is saying that when we discover our true identity, we are transformed and live out of our divine nature. Wholeness is natural to us. It is who we are. It is what we are. We were created in wholeness. We've always been whole. It is a life lived from fear or failure and with courage over our circumstances is how we come to overcome these fears, how we overcome these failures. And with courage, we can change. We can always change. We can do all things through Christ, our divine identity. Perhaps the most significant example of the wholeness of the Christ in full expression is that is our goal. You know, that example is what Jesus said to the people when he would perform a healing. Remember, he said it, I think, more than once. You are whole. Embrace your wholeness. And when he said those things, I believe that he was coming from himself. Or not himself, but he was speaking the truth for the person that he was doing a healing with. He was bringing forth that wholeness from within that person. So are we demonstrating the wholeness that we are? Certainly not all of the time. Certainly we're not demonstrating it all of the time. But the process is the very life of what it means to be Christ in expression. It is up to us to begin to mold ourselves, to begin to see ourselves as what we truly are. We do not adhere to a bunch of rules and regulations. We are not slaves to structure or institutional faith. We are learning and laughing and falling down, and we are stretching. And we are living from our divine nature. And that is our desire. And the more we practice it, the more we will begin to live it. We find our divinity in love and in celebration of life and in appreciation. And we know that there is never a static outline to what we are supposed to do. We follow the inner faith that we have. We follow that inner self that we are. These things, when we follow thoughtless repetition, when we have a conventional observance of what we think is, quote, religious, what we find is that we are maybe becoming the letter of the law, but the letter of the law kills. It is the letter of the law that kills us because we forget the spirit of the law. And if we have forgotten the spirit of the law, then there is no hope for us to ever grow or change. The way of the disciple is necessarily a way of discipline. It is a discipline. If that young prince had not gone every day, and stood in front of that statue, nothing would have changed. Nothing would have changed. And we might say, oh, well, that was impossible. That was only a fable. And maybe it was. And yet, we know personally from our own experience that as we continue to work on our own spiritual unfoldment, we do begin to change. We do begin to see things differently. We do begin to know that something about us is different before we notice it, though mostly other people notice it. And people will say, there's something different about you. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I can see it, and I know there is a difference. And again, Jesus said, through your faith you are made whole. Through your faith you are made whole. And nothing can take that away from you. There is nothing that can take your wholeness from you. Obviously, we are whole in our divine nature. When we wonder if we are whole, then why do we experience this horrible thing? Haven't you asked yourself, why is this happening to me? Why am I experiencing this horrible thing? And I've said so many times, why is the wrong question? Why is the wrong question? The question that we need to be asking ourselves is, what are we going to do with this situation now? What is it, and how are we going to deal with it? Our true divine nature, everything in us wants to be in integrity with that divine nature. Something is wrong consciousness is not a reality but a limited perception. To be able to see beyond that. I really like Reverend Linda's explanation concerning the law of attraction. We do not attract negative conditions, she says. We are attracted to negative conditions. Conditions do not come looking for us. We go looking for them. And I have certainly seen that in my own life on occasion. We limit the law of attraction when we recognize its power only in negative conditions. The highest expression of the law is our natural attraction to wholeness. That is what we're really, truly attracted to, is wholeness. There was once another king. I really like stories about kings this morning. There was another king who had a wise advisor. And his wise advisor followed him everywhere. No matter where he was, he would follow him. And his favorite saying, the wise advisor's favorite saying was, everything happens for good. Well, one day the king went hunting and he had a little accident. And he shot himself in the foot with an arrow. And so he said to his advisor, well, what do you think of that then? And the advisor said, everything happens for good. And this time the king was really upset. In fact, he was so upset, he threw his advisor into prison. And after he threw him into prison, he says, well, now, what do you think? What do you think now? And the advisor said, it's all for the good. And so the king went hunting one day, and as he was hunting, a group of cannibals surrounded them, and all of his men scattered, and they captured the king, and they took him back to their camp, and they were going to have him for dinner. And so before they got him into the pot, they checked him over real good, and they found that he had an injury on his foot. And it was the cannibals' custom that they would not eat anyone that wasn't perfect. So they sent him back out into the jungle. And so here he is. He goes back and he goes to his advisor and he says, wow, you were right. It was for the good. And the advisor said, yes, and my being here was good too, because if I had not been in prison, I would have been with you, and they would have eaten me. So it is all for the good. We all have seen that in our lives as we look back. We look back and we say, oh my gosh, that was a terrible thing. And then we say, but that's what got me to where I am now. And if we look back and say, ooh, I don't like where I am now, then we need to start doing things differently, like seeing our divine potential. seeing our divine nature in us every day. Begin by doing it every day. I know some people don't know why we should do these things every day. Why should we meditate every day? Why should we do these things? Well, it's because as we do it daily, it becomes a habit. And as it becomes a habit, we begin to be able to see that, yes, indeed, changes come from habits. They can come. And, you know, when we have limited perception and we pray every day, we meditate every day, and we think about what it is that we truly are, we begin to see ourselves differently. And so whatever challenges we face today, consider it happening to bring us to the next level. And here are some of the things that we can consciously do to bring us into the next level and an awareness of our wholeness. You can choose one or all of these daily. The first one, daily meditation. Turn on some nice soft music or a guided visualization twice a day for 30 minutes. I know some of you say, I don't have an hour a day to spend in prayer and meditation. But you know what? If your life gets better, you get more time too. I've noticed that. Spend some time in daily education. Read books emphasizing your divine nature, your divine identity. A couple of really good books are Discover the Power Within You by Eric Butterworth and Who Are You by Imelda Shaiklen. These are very good books that are going to help you get into that mindset. Daily introspection. You might want to dust off your old journal and start to write. Start to write down the things that are happening in your life, but not only that, write down the things that you're reading about that inspire you. Write them down and reread them from time to time. If you write down negative things, do not reread them. Never reread a negative thing that you write, because you're just establishing it more into your consciousness. Now, there are many more ideas that Reverend Linda has in her book, and I would suggest you look at those. Maybe these three are not ones that you particularly would warm up to in the beginning, but check them out and see if there isn't something that you can do that's really going to help you. And remember that the soul is pivotal. It can turn without to the world, or it can turn within to your divine nature. Just like the little prince, we focus on the desired outcome and do the work. We can't just focus on the desired outcome. We have to do the work. We have to do the work. That's where the discipline comes in. That's where we begin to turn within and to really start to change our lives. When we choose the divine and condition our consciousness, our entire being is aware of its wholeness. It becomes totally aware of its wholeness. And when we find ourselves in a situation or circumstance that we don't like, who are we going to call? No, not Ghostbusters. We're going to call on our divine nature instead. And so I invite you to do that often. As things don't seem to be going as well as you would like, call on your divine nature. Believe me, you'll be glad you did. God bless. Thank you.